Hello and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be coming in from. Uh, my name is Paul Bradley from Spoke Project Management, and I'm going to take you through the next 40 minutes of content, maybe an hour, including questions for this webinar on absolute beginners, the project essentials. The first line in this particular track, I understand, is I've nothing much to offer. Well, I like to think I've got quite a lot to offer you this afternoon, so I'm going to jump straight in it and take you through the agenda. This is the first of four sessions that we're going to be running this week. I'm going to start them each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 4 p.m. We've got Absolute Beginners, which is a high-level overview for beginners. Changes, which is how to set the project up properly. Let's Dance. Sounds fun, doesn't it? How to get things underway and keeping on track. And then Rebel, what happens when we encounter issues and potential changes from the customers. So today, Absolute Beginners, we're going to look at the general open questions. Rudyard Kipling, an English poet, once wrote a project management poem. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and where and how and who. So this is really what we're going to be looking at in terms of what is project management. We're going to look at objectives, business case, planning, scheduling and organisation. And we're going to do that all in the next 40 minutes. So quite a fast-paced event, but I'm going to hopefully give you some good pointers in terms of what project management is and how it can help. Firstly, have a quick look at why projects fail. I was brought up on project management, from a very young age. My father was bouncing me up and down and reading me the Prince 2, a project management manual when I was just a young child. I kid, of course, because clearly I'm not yet that young. But anyway. I was always told that project management is essentially structured common sense. So that's essentially what we're dealing with here. Why do projects fail? Typical reasons why projects fail: poorly understood and specified requirements. Quite often people don't really know what they want when they undertake a project, and also lack of good business reasons for undertaking the work. Everything we do in life has a reason as to why we're doing it. Usually would be a benefit to us, to somebody else, or to the communities. Mistakes. We often say, always make new mistakes. Now, we're not trying to promote people to make mistakes, but whenever you do make mistakes, make sure they're not repeated old mistakes. We need to learn as we go along. And quite often we go around the same cycles, and it can be quite frustrating. 90% of a project manager's time is communication, and it's what we do all day, every day, and therefore we need to keep people informed, people within our team, stakeholders who have an interest in our project, and quite often I think it's quite a common view that the most common reason for project failure is a lack of communication, and seems to be more the case. I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we've had so many ways to communicate, but somehow that seems to have made it more difficult. Anyway, deliverables, products, outputs, things that we create are not always defined properly. Going back to that poorly specified requirements, really, isn't it? What else have we got on this list? No proper system for managing changes. You may well have heard of a phrase called scope creep, and this is where the original job tends to get a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger again. And if we don't have a mechanism for managing those changes to what the original requirement was, then that can sometimes be quite a challenge. Unclear roles and responsibilities. Okay, we need a proper way of understanding who's responsible for what, and we need to have good control throughout the project. So that's what we're going to be covering. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen now and give you a rundown on everything I've just spoken about and how we can really control that through our project. Okay, so Absolute Beginners is where we're at now. Do join me for the rest of the week, though, for the other sessions. It'd be great. that's a high level agenda of what we're covering, and they are the reasons for projects failing. Okay, so I've just been through those. I'm going to go through each of these as I present each session in more detail. So, structured common sense. Where will I find all the answers? And as I mentioned, it's the open questions. What are we aiming to achieve? Why are we doing it? How will it be done? Who needs to be involved? I remember 20 years ago, or more actually now, when I started in this industry, I used to have to explain to people what project management is. And people used to say, well, that's obvious, isn't it? Well, it is obvious. When you read down this list, project management is straightforward. But when you put it into a business context, that's when it becomes quite difficult with people's agendas, political sway, and also trying to coordinate many complex elements of a project. So what I want to do is I want to address that project failure that we went through and look at how we might get off to a good start in our projects. And the first good start that we can make is understanding the project objectives. Now, there's a technique called SMART style objectives, where we have specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Specific in that the objective needs to be very specifically, clearly one objective. Okay, that doesn't mean that each project has one objective. One project could have a number of objectives, but when we're describing it, it needs to be very specific to itself. It needs to be measurable as well. We need to know when we would have achieved that objective, as opposed to being subjective, where it becomes opinion. Achievable, it needs to be realistic and able to be achieved. And that way we can make sure everybody's on board, and it can act as a motivator to meet that objective. Relevant to the context of the project that we're undertaking, and also time-bound. Projects have a finite time. They don't just roll on and on and on forever. We have a clearly defined time frame, so we have a set amount of resource within a set amount of time to a set budget and set resources. Got a personal example of an objective there, which is written in a SMART style. Book a 7-day all-inclusive holiday for June 2026 in Southern Europe for 2 people with a total budget of less than £2,000. Sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah, guess what I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, just a simple objective. Some other examples actually when you put it into the business speak. I did the personal one first so that it shows that it can be fairly straightforward. A few examples of business type objectives for projects. System implementation: implement a new system to replace the old one with 95% of staff trained and actively using it within 3 months of go live. Okay, so as I say, a clear objective with clearly measurable criteria within it, achievable to the organisation, and has a clear time frame. There's 2 others there which you can read when you receive the slides. The slides are available right away if anybody really wants to request them. I think my colleague Suzanne you can let everybody know if they'll be sent anyway, but you may need to request them. But they are available to everybody. So that's the objectives in a SMART style. What we then do is we need to make sure that we have a business case. Okay, and a business case is the driving force to any project. Remember those reasons, the common reasons why projects fail. Quite often it's because there isn't a clear driver for the project, and that's usually because we haven't defined the benefits of doing the project. Within life, we always have a reason for doing things, and it's the business case within project management that gives us that reason. So the driving force is inclusive of things like the reasons why the project is needed. Perhaps we're losing market share, or perhaps we need to expand our portfolio of offering. We look at options as well. What are the options that we can consider for achieving a similar outcome? There are always 3 different types of options that we must consider. The first one being do nothing. So what happens if we did nothing? I guess we'd continue to lose market share in the example I gave. We could do the minimum. Now, sometimes we might have a change of legislation, for example, and the do minimum would be, let's just get enough in place to cover the legislation, and then we'll have a fuller update later. Or we just do everything we can and look at different options for that. We need to clearly define the benefit as well. Now, most projects will have a number of different benefits that it could expect to achieve once the project's delivered. Usually, project benefits will be accrued after the project is finished, because then we have a time to use the new system or the new way of working. And that's where the benefits can start being realized some 3, 6 months, a year, 2 years following the project delivery. But there are some projects that might accrue benefits throughout their time within their life cycle. Benefits need to be measurable as well. And the benefit is essentially the measured improvement from where we started from to what we're aiming to achieve. And if we can get them quantified, that would be great. Sometimes there are intangible benefits, of course. You might look for improved customer service and satisfaction, happier staff, but there's always a way of tracking that down and really understanding what, from a measurable point of view, that might mean. And then you have major threats. Major threats are the key threats that would compromise the project meeting its objectives and delivering its benefits. And again, I've got a couple of examples there. Improved well-being through resting. I'm still on my holiday thought process here. Improved personal well-being through resting to achieve 25% increase in my productivity. Sounds nice. Reduce stress to help improve my relationships with friends, family, and colleagues. Now, the second one there is somewhat intangible, but nevertheless, would be seen as a benefit. Again, put that into more of a business aspect, and we've got financial benefits. Reduced annual operating costs by £500,000 within 12 months, evidenced by audited financial statements. Another financial benefit might be increased revenue by 15%, equivalent to 2 million, within the next financial year, verified by sales reports. And then you've got efficiency and productivity. Customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction is interesting because you can quantify this. It's not just we hope we have better satisfied customers. In this instance, we've got reduced customer complaints by 30% from 1,000 per quarter to 700 within 12 months, tracked via a CRM system. It may be you do surveys, to test whether you've improved your customer satisfaction, or look at repeat business rates and so on. But these are the key drivers as to why we run projects. We're now moving on to the how. And the how, with regards to project management, is looking at designing how to run the project. Okay, so this is very much about looking at how we're going to put the plans together, what tools we're going to use, how we're going to manage the risks associated with the project, what quality standards and systems we need to meet, because we need to remain compliant within our industry sector, and for regulation and legislation and so on. We might think about how we're going to keep people informed. Remember, lack of communication is often a reason for project failure. So how can we keep people informed, and what channels are we going to use, and so on. So there's quite a lot we need to think about here in terms of pulling all this together as to how the project will be managed. And this is all part of the project design. And you may be familiar or heard of different phrases like the PID, is the project initiation documentation, PMP, project management plan, a PDP, project delivery plan, PEP, a project execution plan. They're all the same. Yeah, basically it's our roadmap for the project. And the sort of things we have within this roadmap for the project are, firstly, what do we need to deliver? What has it got to look like? What criteria does it need to meet? That's known as defining the output. It's also known as a deliverable and also known as a product. It depends what methodology and guidance you're using, but an output, deliverable, and product is essentially what the project will create. Okay. We've got scope. Scope is basically what's in and what's out. And quite often, we have a very simple technique in terms of saying, look, we've got all these different things that we may well produce as part of this project. And then what we can do is we can say, look, what we'll do is we will include these within the scope of our project. Okay. And these are exclusions, so they are outside of scope. And what we'll do for the others there, well, we'll keep them outside of scope at the moment, but if we've got time, we can, we can bring them in the scope. Okay, so very simple scoping technique. There are many, many other techniques, of course, for that. Essentially, what we're doing is we're identifying all of the outputs and the work that's needed to be undertaken to create those outputs, and that gives us the scope of our project. Costs. We need to break down our costs. Now, typically this would happen a little bit earlier. It depends, though. Sometimes it's seen as a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Do we have a budget where we have a certain amount of money to spend on the project and we can see what we get with that? Or do we need to secure the funding for the job in hand? Okay, so it's whichever way around it comes. But essentially, to help establish the budget, we might look at a cost breakdown structure, so we can look at what money we need and where it might be spent in terms of people, equipment, other resources, and so on. We also need to plan about the other resources. It's not just about money, but it's about time. It's about how many people we might need, how much equipment, how much material, and so on. And there's various estimating techniques around this as well. And we are going to look at some of these in a few moments' time. Approaches. Exactly what I was talking about when this first slide came up. When I'm looking at my PID or my PMP or my PDP, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the approaches, sometimes referred to as strategy or plan. You might have a risk management strategy, a risk management approach, or a risk management plan, or a risk management procedure. It's just terminology. Okay. Now you can already gauge that, because there's so many different names for the same thing, it's very good to have this common language when implementing project management within your organization. So again, it's really useful to have a common framework across an organization so everybody's talking about the same thing and knowing they're talking about the same thing. So what we have is we have the risk management approach, the quality management approach, the change control approach, and communication management approach, and others as we need. So these are very much the processes and procedures as to how do we do things within this project. We have an organization. We need to plan this and think about this. Who's going to be involved? Who holds the purse strings? Who's the ultimate authority? Who's the project manager? Are there any assistant project managers or help for the management of the project? Are we using internal staff? Are we using external staff? Are we going into partnership with another organisation? And with all this brings challenges to understand who's responsible for what. So we create a team structure with clearly defined roles and clearly defined responsibilities associated with each of those roles as well. And again, I will show you some information on that a little bit later on. And finally, controls. Once we've designed this project, how are we going to control it? How are we going to monitor it? Okay. So depending on the project and depending how long it's going to take, how complex it is, how many organisations are involved, how much risk there is, well, that will determine how tightly we control our project. And this may lead to us establishing one long stage of the project, or it may be lots of shorter stages so that we don't try to plan too far ahead, because it may be too complex too. It may be a new project that we've not undertaken before, and therefore we need to have shorter term planning as opposed to longer term, which will increase the risk and reduce the understanding going forward. So lots of things to think about there. How decisions will be made. Is it just down to our project sponsor, or should we seek other advice within the decision framework? And what sort of information do people need to make those decisions? So this is all about crafting your roadmap for the project. I'm going to expand on this as we go through. So the first four that we were just looking at. What do we need to create? So the outputs, the scope of the project, what's in and what's out, the costs and the cost breakdown structure, and estimating. So firstly, looking at the what and the scope. What we have is we have a couple of techniques, if you like, called the product breakdown structure. Okay. Yeah, product breakdown structure. And this is where we take the output of the project and we break it down to show the decomposites. And the further we break down, the more detailed we can become, and we can understand the output much better. From there, we can create what we call product descriptions. I'm going to go a little bit diagrams here. So what I'll do is, like, for these products here, I would write down essentially the specifications, the quality criteria, so that we know what that output needs to do in order to be fit for purpose. Okay, and there you go. So I'm already understanding a lot more. If I need to break down further, then I will do. Okay, but you go to whatever level is sensible. And then what I can do, once I understand what we're delivering, I can start looking at what we need to do to deliver it. And that's known as a work breakdown structure, a WBS. And again, some people on this webinar may well have heard of these phrases. And the work breakdown structure is saying, look, we need to do these activities in order to produce this. Okay. So what I've got now is my scope. And my scope is all of my products plus all of the work that is needed to be carried out. Okay. Next, let's have a look at costs. So we have a cost breakdown structure, and that's here. Okay. And with the cost breakdown structure, this is helping me to establish my project budget, but it'll also help me to manage my project budget as well. And the way I do this is I look at all the different types of costs that I may well incur. And in this very, very simple example, I've just used labour, equipment, materials. Okay, I'll clearly break those down to a further level or two so that I can show the labour would be maybe managers, engineers, consultants, junior engineers, junior consultants, and so on. Equipment, it might be machinery, testing equipment, software, and so on. Okay. So I'd break these different resources down. And then what I can do is across the top there, I've got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So in stage 1, what I can see quite clearly is that I'm going to need, from labour, I'm going to need £1 million worth of labour. Okay. In stage 2, £2 million of labour. And stage 3, £1 million of labour, which gives me a total labour cost of 4 million. Okay. What I can do as well, I can also come down and say, look, how much am I going to need in terms of budget-wise for stage 1? And what that tells me is there's £3 million of investment to complete stage 1. Okay, so I can do this to establish my budget, but I can also do that to manage that, manage that budget going forward for my reporting. Okay, estimating. With estimating, there's a few techniques here. Now, obviously, this is a very high-level webinar for everybody to get a feel for project management and what it is and so on. And what I've got here is just a few typical examples that we can use while when we're estimating the resources needed. Now, what we have is very early on in the project, when we don't have very much information available to us, we might use comparative estimating, sometimes known as analogous. And what we're doing is we're saying, look, we've done a project like this before, and this project is very similar. So you can compare the two and assume, if you like, that the resources and the timescales, the costs, and so on will be fairly similar to a previous project that we've undertaken. Got to be careful because all projects are unique. Okay, you will be in a different time frame. You will be working with different people. You'll have different risks associated with it. There might be different things going on in the world. So you've got to be careful with comparative estimating. But usually, it's quite useful for when there's not much information available elsewhere. Okay. Right. Comparative, sometimes known as analogous. There's also analytical. And analytical fits in with this breakdown structure quite nicely. Okay. And what we do here is we work from the bottom up. So where we've broken down those products, what we can then do is we can estimate at the lowest level and then aggregate those costs up again. And this way, what we're essentially doing is we're estimating here for each of these individual activities, and then we basically add these two together so that we can understand the resources required for that activity, and the same for this, and then we add it all up to find out what the overall costs may be. Okay, and that's analytical. Now, of course, what you need is you need to have done your planning in order to carry out an analytical estimating technique. Okay, which is why this often comes in the initiation stages or within the planning stages of the project. Okay, then. The final estimating technique I've got for you today is parametric. Okay, and this is quite simply multiplying up. So if one of these disk things that I've got here, if one costs £1,000 and takes 3 weeks to build, well, if I need 10, it's going to take 10 times more money and 10 times more time. So 10 will cost £10,000 and 30 weeks. And again, not always the case. It's not always quite that simple, because as we've created the first one, and maybe even the second and third one, it may well be that our rate gets better, and we can start accelerating our rate of development, and therefore it might take 28 weeks. We might become more efficient as well. So again, it's not always quite so accurate, but another good way of estimating. Okay. Right. So that's planning. Okay. Setting the project up. The other the other three parts of that list, if I just go back a slide, let me just come back here. There you go. Okay, this is planning. So what we've done is we've covered remember the breakdown structure, product breakdown structure, work breakdown structure. Okay, we looked at the scope. Okay, that's how we can understand the scope. Cost breakdown structure. Okay, and estimating, those three estimating techniques that I just took you down. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take you through the other three points on there: approaches, organization, and controls. So what I've got here is firstly approaches. There you go. Remember, I talked about the PID, the PMP, project initiation document, project management plan. Basically, it's a summary of all the information we need that tells us how the project is going to be run, and that includes things like the quality management plan. Now, the quality management plan will reference any industry standards, any ISO standards, any processes and procedures, any policy, anything like that we need to recognise and observe and conform to within our project. Because most organisations have a quality management system that we need to embed within our project. We'll also have details of how we're going to manage risk. Now, most organisations will have a risk management procedure. Okay, typically, how do you manage risk? I won't ask you to respond to me there, but quite often you have low, medium, and high. Okay, quite a basic 1, 2, 3. Okay, how likely is the risk to happen? It's probably low. If it happened, what's the impact? Oh, it's high. So we have probability versus impact. Okay, we have a scale of measure, in this instance a simple one of low, medium, and high. You might have 1 to 4, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 100 with a suggested rating. You might have different ways of responding to a risk. Maybe we'll do something different. Maybe we'll reduce the likelihood of it happening. Yeah, perhaps what we'll do is we'll just let it go, and we'll have a contingency plan, a fallback plan that we can switch to if it does happen. Okay, so different things that we can do, but we need to understand what that approach is. Okay. Change. Now, in this instance, change, I'm talking about change control. So if somebody says, hey, I want a blue one of those, and then halfway through the project, they say, no, I don't, I want a green one. And I want two of them. It's like, right, okay, then how are we going to manage this? Okay, and there's a change control step-by-step procedure that we need to clearly define for our project so that we can avoid situations where the scope of the project gets broadened out without actually additional resources being added. That causes us real problems if we don't control this, really well. Communications. Okay, we all know about communications. We communicate every day of our lives, whether we're in project management or not. We're communicating through rich communication, which is very much about voice, face-to-face, facial expressions, body language, tone, speed of voice, volume, and so on. Okay. We get instant feedback as well with that sort of communication. But there's also very much lighter communication, isn't there? Instant messaging, for example, where you have no intonation. It's just a line of text, really. And sometimes that can be misinterpreted, especially now that we're getting punctuation and different types of emojis that mean different things. Most people think a smiley face is a smiley face, but it depends what sort of smiley face you put on it. And that's even if you do smiley faces in the business environment. So there's an awful lot of pitfalls in communication. Even though it seems to be much easier to communicate now, sometimes it can be a little challenge if you don't understand the etiquette. But with communications, we need to understand who needs to be kept informed of the project, how they're going to be kept informed, who's going to provide information, what sort of information they need, what sort of format they want. Some people like a nice high-level picture, other people like the more detail. Okay, people are different in terms of what they look for. And then finally, issues. Okay. What happens when things don't go the way we think they're going to go? Now, I've got I think the final session on Thursday is called Rebel. And that's going to deal with issue and issue management and change control and so on in terms of what happens when things don't go according to plan. We'll dig a little deeper in that. But nevertheless, when planning the project, we need to understand what our process is. If we've estimated that something's going to take 3 weeks and it's actually going to now take 4 weeks, I'm 2 weeks in, I've got 1 week left, but I'm going to need 2 weeks. What do I do? Well, the advice is do something quick. Don't wait till another week's gone and then say, oh, actually, I've not finished it when I should have done by now. It's all about forecasting, making sure we're keeping people informed and getting additional resources as soon as possible if we need them. If we can't get the additional resource, then we're going to have to reduce what we deliver. Okay, something has to give. Anyway, this is all about setting up how we're going to manage the project. Organisation, the organisation of the project is essentially looking at the people side, the project management team essentially. And this is looking at a sponsor who is ultimately accountable for the project. And then what we have is we have the rest of the project management team in terms of the project manager with various support functions like project support, planners, schedulers, risk managers, and so on. They'd all be part of the project management team, or it could be provided by what we call a PMO being a project management office. Okay, it may well be providing a lot of high-level information, but maybe also some admin support as well. Fantastic. And then we've got team managers and resources, essentially specialists, either from our own organisation or from external parties. Okay. More on that when I come to organisation, because I've got the same diagram in a few slides, so I'll go a little bit more detail on that in a few moments' time. And finally, controls. Remember, this is all about planning. This is setting up the project. Controls. What do I mean by controls? Well, what I mean by controls is how are we going to manage the project? Are we going to have week by week stages where we get the senior management involved every week, tell them what's going on, get the authority for the money and the spend for that next week? It's like, oh, is that too much? Are we going to tie everybody up on a weekly basis? Nah, probably not. Let's do it on a monthly basis then. Okay, every month we will get together. I'll give you a monthly plan. You can then authorize me that money, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do with it and what you can expect at the end of that month. And then we'd go again, and we'd do that every month. How does that sound? Still sounds a little bit over the top to me, So supposing if we just had a report every month, and okay, then well, you sign me off for the next year. Whoa, no, I'm not going to sign off a big budget for the next year. What about every 3 months? It's like, yeah, look, why don't we just get away from time altogether? Yeah, because time is not really relevant, is it, when we're doing projects? I think what we should be doing is more event based. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll look at the plan. Okay, and in my example, okay, yes, I've got equal stages here. Okay, I didn't mean to do that. What I should have done a plan like this. Okay, that's my plan. And I should have said that's the first stage, that's the next stage, that's the next stage, and then that's the end of the project. And what we do is we work on a basis of what we call event-based planning. We manage the length of our stages depending on what's happening. Okay, so these actually mean something. If you have like a time-based approach, most of the time you're meeting when there aren't any decisions to be made. Sound familiar? Also, so event-based planning is much better in this respect. And based on that, that gives us how we're going to control the project. It also means we can define these reports. Okay, so it may well be that we do have monthly reports. That's fine to do those on a time basis. Okay, and that gives the decision makers what they need to know without having to meet all the time. Okay, and what we will do is we'll have those stop-go decisions when they're needed to be made. Okay, it works really, really well. And that way we can define how the project will be controlled from a point of view of information, decision making, who's going to be involved, how much commitment at any one time we're going to make, what levels of plan we need to go to, what detail we're supposed to be in that documentation, and so on. Okay, and that way we've set the whole project up. It's all working really well and lovely. Scheduling. Right, scheduling. Very different to planning. Okay, planning is about how we're going to do it. Scheduling is when things are going to happen. Now we have different levels of plans. Okay, we have one for the whole project, one for each of those stages. And also we have like team plans, if you like, within sections of work. Okay, and then how we get all of this, well, this is where we go through a series of steps in order to produce these plans, these schedules. Okay, so I'm going dependency networks, critical path analysis. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm just going to flash it up and resourcing that schedule. So firstly, 3 levels of plan: a plan for the overall project, a plan for each stage of the project, and team plans for the development of the work. And each one of those gets more and more detailed the lower level you go to. Okay, you can't expect to plan the whole project in detail at project level. It doesn't work. If I've got a 2-3 year project, I'm not going to plan it all in detail. I'm not going to go to the nuts and bolts. I'm going to break it down and I'm going to go to the appropriate level of detail for each level of that plan. In terms of format, they're all going to take the same format. They're all going to use the same tools and techniques to create them. I just get more details as I go down. Then what I've got is I need to think about actually I'll put all this up now. Okay, I'll just put it all up like that. Okay, what I've got here, I'll just explain what this is. I've got an activity here. Okay, activity number 10. I don't know what it is. Perhaps it's my holiday. Perhaps activity 10, I've got to decide where I'm going first. Okay, and then once I've decided where I'm going, and by the way, deciding where I'm going is going to take 3 days. Okay, I'm going to weigh up a lot of options here. Once I've decided where I'm going, what I can do is I can research a venue. Okay. I can start thinking about some new clothes, depending whether I'm going to somewhere hot or cold, and then I can start researching some currency. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll get my passport ready, I'll get the travel information, and then I'll go on holiday. Okay. Now, what this is all about is looking at the dependency. Okay, what needs to be done first, what needs to be done next, and what's the dependency from one to another? And what we do is usually go in one direction. Okay, top to bottom, left to right, showing the dependencies of each of these. I'm not going to take you through a full critical path analysis and how it works, but typically I can start on day 0. It's going to take 3 days. It means I've finished on day 3, which means none of these can start until day 3. Add the durations, 7 days, finish on day 10, and so on. So I'll go forward there. Don't worry about the bottom ones. What I do is I work backwards to be able to find some information that I need in terms of when I can start scheduling. So clearly, day 0 is there. 1, 2, day 3. Okay, that is my first activity, which means all these can then start. Okay. And what I do with this is technique. I'm not going to go too deep into this because it's very, very complex. But what I do is I start putting those details of activity on something a little bit more easier to understand, like a bar chart or a Gantt chart if it's more detailed, of course. And there you go. So this is my first few activities here. I'm actually taking these activities that are on this pathway here, mainly because they've all got zeros in that bottom middle box, which means they can't be moved. That's just basically how they are. However, when I look at activity 50, well, it starts on day 3, finishes on day 10. But as I've worked all this out, I've actually got 2 days leeway to schedule it. So I can push it back a day or 2 if I want. And I've got that in the next couple of activities as well. Okay, I've got a bit of what we call float. Okay, as long as I get it done sometime between day 3 and day 11, I can do that and move things around if I need to. Okay, and that's how I start to schedule. More to it than that, but you know, that's about what we need at the moment, because that's given me my bar chart or my Gantt chart, for want of a better word. And what I can then do is I can then start adding resources. So at the moment, what I've done is I've got my holiday plan going on here. Okay, 18 days, fantastic. Okay, that's how long it's going to take me to get everything all together that I need. But what I can do then is I start looking at my diary, and I've got to do work. I still have to go to work, unfortunately, although I do love it, as hopefully you can see from that. And what I've got here is let's take them off a second. What I've got here is I've actually got 26 days now. How did that happen? Well, because I'm not going to be doing it every day for 18 days. I've got weekends, I've got work to do, I've got a few other commitments, and actually I've had to spread it out a bit. Okay, and that's known as resource leveling, because I've got limited amount of resources. I can't do it all in 18 days. Fair enough if I was full-time on this, but I'm not. So it's actually going to take 26 days. Okay, and also what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some decision points in. Firstly, there. I mean, if I can't decide where I'm going to go on holiday, I might decide just not to bother with the rest of this schedule. So these are very much stop-go decisions. And it's the same in business projects. Okay, you have those key points of delivery where a decision needs to be made. Okay, right. Finally, organization. As I said before, you've got different levels of organization. Okay, typically the sponsor is the ultimate authority. Okay, owns the business case. Okay. One person. So one person ultimately accountable for the project. Of course, they'll take advice and guidance from other areas, really largely from what we see as a user or customer and a supplier. Okay, so they would feed into the sponsor, but it's the sponsor that has the final decision as to whether the project should continue. Okay, you've got a project manager. Again, I don't know what's going on there. One person in the project manager role who's responsible for managing the project for the sponsor. Okay, again, it comes down to accountability. Yeah, need one person managing the project. If they need help, got your project management team. Okay, assistant project managers, planners, schedulers, and so on. Project support, provide admin support, booking things in and out, arranging meetings, taking minutes, and so on. Okay. And that can work really well. And then also you've got team managers and resources. And this is usually where the development happens. Okay. You'd have specialist team managers. They're both also, you may have internal and external resources. Okay. For the for the team managers, for the project staff teams, you might have construction engineers, you might have software developers, you might have bricklayers, and so on. Okay. That's very much the organisation structure. Now, some roles can be combined. It may well be that actually we don't have that big a project or that complex a project. So what I'll do is here, one person. Okay, one person managing the project and also doing their own support and admin and managing the construction teams. And here you got one person. So that way you have 2 people on your project. Or it may well be you have 20, 30, 40, 50 people on your project. It's that scalable. Okay, but all with roles and responsibilities and of course job descriptions. And that is the 6 honest serving men. Their names are what and why and when and where and how and who. And that's essentially what we're doing with project management. Okay. There's plenty of training and education available. I see there's quite a lot, sort of been written in the chat. But just to let you know, I'm not on a hard sell or anything here, but just so you know, if you're new to project management, what I would recommend, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years. What I would recommend is you got APM PFQ. It stands for Project Fundamentals Qualification. Okay, 2-day course. It's great. It gives you a life cycle. Okay, so essentially, sort of from the very start of the project through initiation, through development to transition and close. That takes you through the whole life cycle, and it's got a lot of good techniques in there as well. A lot of what I've been through just this afternoon. But also you've got Prince 2 Foundation. Okay, and now I was brought up on Prince 2. This is very much sort of in my heritage, and Prince 2 is very much a framework. It gives you the what should happen, when it should happen, who should do it, why it should happen, but it's not very much how. Okay, but it gives you a really solid framework. So if you're new to project management, the Prince 2 framework is very, very robust. Yeah, and it then gives you that framework to hang everything else off. Really, really good. Okay. If you're more experienced with projects, you've got APM again. APM, by the way, is the Association for Project Management. It's the UK's chartered body for the project professional. Okay, APM PMQ, which is Project Management Qualification, 5-day course, and that really has quite an extensive breadth of topics. Okay, it's based on a competence framework, 28 competencies within that framework, covering all sorts of things, from the hard side of project management, of quality and issue management, risk management, scheduling, and so on. It's also got some teamwork and leadership included in it, and project environmental aspects, and so on. So that's a whole range. Now, what we've got here, by the way, these are multi-choice examinations associated with them. Okay. These are still multi-choice, but they're called objective tests. So they're based on scenarios and open questions and that sort of thing. So they're a little bit more tricky. But if you've got experience, I'd recommend APM PMQ, Prince 2 Practitioner, which is more about applying Prince 2 to a scenario. So good if you've been involved in that sort of thing. Agile PM, I've not really gone into Agile because I just haven't had time, but perhaps we need a 5th session, for Agile. I'll have to try and think of a track from the greatest hits for Agile. Anyway, Agile PM, that's very much a more iterative approach. So, if we're not very clear on what we're trying to deliver, it may well be that we have a cycle of development and then reflect and think about what have we learned and are we now clear in terms of what we want? It's called iterative development. Okay, it's iterative and incremental, and it's been adopted in its droves. So everybody's going agile, but not all projects are for agile approaches. This is the thing, so you've got to be careful what you wish for on that. But it's a really, really good, over 250,000 people practitioner level now in that. And also project planning and control. If you've got experience in project management and you've may even have some of these qualifications, PPC digs in more deeper in terms of project planning, project scheduling, project monitoring, and project controlling. So it's much more technique based, usually a 3-day course for foundation and 5-day for practitioner. So there you have it. Finally, with regard to Spoke, you may know us, you may not know us. Hopefully, I've represented us in the way we are. Really, we've been around a long time. 1994, a fantastic achievement to see many different challenges. We deliver classroom training, so we can come to you if you've got a small group of people. Okay. Usually the break even, if you've got 4 to 6 people, it's usually cheaper for us to come to you because you just put them all in one place. Also, we have a scheduled virtual classroom for all of the different courses and certifications. We've got e-learning, and we're pretty influential. We've worked with a lot of training organisations that are in this accredited market. So it's nice that we're seen to be that pioneering and helpful to not just our customers but also to actually our competitors as well. We work very closely with most of the industry. The final point I just wanted to make is this. Okay, 4 p.m. Okay, we're going to do changes. Okay, and changes is really setting up the project properly. So when I was talking about those approaches, I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper of those and look at an initiation or definition phase of a project to really dig in a bit deeper. Okay, so that's tomorrow. And then Wednesday, let's dance. Okay, this is monitoring and controlling your project. So, sort of reporting on progress and getting things done. And then finally on Thursday, Rebel, which is basically, again, looking at variances, looking at forecasting, looking at a little bit of earned value actually, and also what happens when we come across issues and what to do with them, and escalating and managed by exception and all that lovely stuff. Okay, so that's going to be good fun. Really looking forward to delivering those. Hopefully, you've got a feel for how we deliver our events. True enthusiasts. I mean, 30 years later, and I'm still like loving every minute of it. Don't be misinterpreting me, though. Look, we deliver all our events like it's the first time, every time. Not the first time because we don't really know what we're doing and talking about, yeah, but first time as in enthusiastic, yeah. It never really gets dull, does it? Let's be honest. Okay, so we always like to keep the energy up with our training and treat you well. Now then, I've seen a few requests for the slides, absolutely, we'll send the slides out to you. If you've got any questions with regards to the training and certification, do get in touch with John Paul. John Paul here, head of customer service. He will do you good. Okay. He's got a great way about him. He's delivering some of these courses himself as well. But also have a chat with him. I'm sure he can do you a good deal. All the details are on the website as well, but I'd probably encourage you to get in touch with him. If anyone wants to put any questions now in the chat with regards to the content, I'm more than happy to answer anything on the fly as well. Okay. But otherwise, get in touch. I'm just going to put John Paul's direct email address in there, okay, as well, because I see the phone number's gone in there. But get in touch with John Paul on sales@spoke.com, and I'm sure we'll do well. If you want to attend tomorrow's, get registering on that one, and I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow and going a little bit deeper in some of those topics. Okay. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat for the next 5 minutes in case anyone's got any questions. Otherwise, thank you for coming, and we'll see you again tomorrow, hopefully. Yeah, 8 p.m. 2 days online. It's in this sort of format. It's virtual classroom. If you've got a small group, we can come to you and deliver it face to face at your place. Nice to see there's a lot of people coming tomorrow as well. I'm looking forward to these events. We should do this more often, guys, you know. If anyone's got any suggestions for webinars that you'd like to see as well, by all means get in touch with us and you know, we'd be delighted to put something together as a short webinar. Les, yeah, it's all recorded, okay, so you will be able to rewatch it. And Lisa, yeah, you can book through Spoke for the APM 2 days. Get in touch with John Paul. I'll put his email address there and his phone number. There you go. It doesn't seem to be any more questions coming through. I'll switch off now. Thank you for attending, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.